Hey everyone, this is Alex from Wicked Good Everything, and today I'm going to show you how to make the real silver Witcher medallion. So this project will be good for cosplay, other costume decorations, or even just for fun hobbyists to make by themselves. I'll provide the 3D printed file for you to print off, and you can make this silver medallion in any way, shape, or form. Here I've made the medallion with aluminum during my initial tests, but if you're already at the metal casting stage, you can probably afford the $50 of silver. So the first step in the project was to find the right picture to use as the reference for the Witcher medallion design. Netflix released the promo shots of Henry Cavill as Geralt of Rivia a few months ago, and I found the most straight-on shot of the Witcher medallion I could, and then I brought that and imported that image into Fusion 360 to begin the design process. Once in Fusion 360, I chose the diameter of the medallion that I wanted, which is around 3 centimeters, and then began drawing the wolf's head in the surrounding circular background. Once the wolf's head in the background was drawn, I began to raise the reliefs of the wolf's head to the dimensions I wanted. I chose a thickness that would not be too heavy and not be too much of a waste of silver at the end. Once the 3D designing was finished, I was able to start the 3D printing. I used PLA to print the medallion, and I printed at a resolution of around 0.06 millimeters. Once the 3D printings were finished, I began to attach the 3D printed medallions to the sprue and the plastic base that I used for the investment casting. I used a casting wax to attach the 3D printed Witcher medallion to the neck of the sprue and the base itself. Once I had created the sprue, I began the process for making the mold. To make the mold, I took the sprue and put it inside the steel casting flask that I use. Once inside the flask, I sealed it with more casting wax and then began mixing the investment powder. I used SRS investment powder and mixed it with the appropriate amount of water given in the data sheets. Once I had made the investment mixture, I put that in the vacuum to pump out the air bubbles that could be pumped out. Once those were pumped out, I poured the investment mixture into the casting flask and put that back in the vacuum chamber to pump out any additional bubbles and air that was trapped by the 3D printed medallion. Once the bubbles had been pumped out, I left the flask alone to cure overnight. So once the mold had cured, I began the burnout process to remove the plastic from the mold to leave behind a negative image. I placed the flask inside my burnout oven, and it sat in the burnout oven for about 6 hours before the casting process. During the burnout time, I bring the temperature up to around 200 degrees Celsius to melt out the plastic. Once the majority of the plastic has been melted out, I raise the temperature even higher to burn out the rest of the plastic, leaving behind no residue. Once all of the plastic's been burned out, we can begin the actual casting process. So I set up the furnace, and I also set up the vacuum chamber, which will help casting the material itself. Next, I weighed out the appropriate amount of silver. In Fusion 360, you can select the material you want, and it'll tell you based on the volume of your design how much silver you need. I weighed out around 60 grams of Argentium silver and added the appropriate amount of flux to the crucible. Then I added the silver in the crucible to the melting furnace and turned the melting furnace on. To melt Argentium silver, you need a temperature of between 900 and 1000 degrees Celsius. I had to add a hairdryer to give enough oxygen to the flame to get the heat hot enough. So once the silver had been liquid for about 5 minutes, I knew it was at the right temperature.
It's hot.
The next step was to take the molds out of the oven, which were set to around 600 degrees Celsius, and put them on the vacuum chamber. I applied the vacuum. Once the vacuum gauge read a lower pressure, I knew that the vacuum was going through the mold, and I was able to turn off the melting furnace. After turning off the melting furnace, I quickly bring over the silver to the casting mold and pour the silver. After waiting a few minutes for the silver to cool, I turned off the vacuum and took the mold with the silver in it over to the water to quench it. 1, to cool it off, and 2, to remove the investment plaster, which is easily dissolved in water while it's hot. After 2 minutes, once the silver had cooled, I removed the silver casting from the water. After retrieving the silver medallion, it looks like this. In these close-up shots, you can see the imperfections left during the casting process. I decided not to recast it for this video, and I think that the imperfections add to the aged look of the medallion. The next step to begin the polishing process was to polish the back and the sides that were easily accessed by sandpaper. Going from 120 grit sandpaper all the way to 600 grit sandpaper, I was able to polish the sides and the back of the casting. To get at the front of the casting, specifically the wolf's face and in between the background and the wolf itself, I had to use rubberized abrasives to access these points. I went all the way up to about 600 grit to obtain the amount of shine I wanted on the sample. If I went any higher, it could have been more shiny, but I was happy with the results I had at 600 grit. The next step in the finishing process is to add the patina. I mixed together liver of sulfur and hot water and submerged the silver medallion in the liver of sulfur to achieve the patina I wanted. After about 1 second, I removed the silver medallion and noted the orange-yellow patina, which is more of a patina than I needed. To remove some of the patina but still maintain the dark coating I wanted, I mixed up a mixture of sodium bicarbonate and water and began to rub the silver until I had the color I wanted. The final step in the medallion making process was to make the necklace. This was done by drilling a hole through the necklace and using waxed leather braided cord, snaking it through the medallion and tying the final knot. And that's it. Once I finished the medallion, I put it on, grabbed my sword, and went to slay some wyverns.